Welcome back, March 1st, 2021. The cancel culture has now come to the Cat in the Hat, to Dr. Seuss. I read today from Deadline.com. In Virginia, they do not like green eggs and ham or Dr. Seuss. The good Dr. Seuss, a.k.a. Theodore Geisel, has been dropped from the annual Read Across America event, a national day to encourage reading. Dr. Seuss books have long been a staple of the program. Dr. Seuss, a major supplier of content for television and film through such characters as The Grinch, The Cat in the Hat, and Horton Hears a Who, was banned because his books allegedly have, quote, strong racial undertones, close quote, according to the school system. That's the Loudoun County, Virginia school system. They said they will look toward books they believe are, quote, more inclusive and diverse and reflective of our student community, close quote. Dr. Seuss's books have been under fire for some time by woke observers who believe they are not diverse in their presentations. A 2019 report claimed some of the books, quote, feature animal or non-human characters that transmit Orientalist, anti-black, and white supremacist messaging through allegories and symbolism, close quote. How do you like that? Non-human characters transmitting racist messages. Look, I've read them all. Find me one. Well, they did in Virginia. Listen to this from Charisse Granger Mabuga. She is described in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as a national board-certified teacher and a parent. She writes the following, quote, nearly 7 years ago when I was pregnant with my first child and filled with all the wonder and anticipation of an inexperienced mom-to-be, I was gifted a lovely hardcover collection of Dr. Seuss classics by a dear co-worker and friend. From How the Grinch Stole Christmas to The Cat in the Hat, this anthology of Seuss favorites struck me as a thoughtful and generous gift, as we were both high school English teachers, with a shared love of language, literature, and reading. I was eager, as is to be expected of any new mom, to read my soon-to-be-born baby, a boy, and Dr. Seuss's famous and well-known stories seemed a wonderful start. I proudly displayed the book on a shelf in his nursery, and though I rarely pulled it down to read, I always thought it a beautiful addition to my son's personal library. Let me break the quote just a second to pause and note, she liked Dr. Seuss books. And you know it's coming, but until this point, teacher, parent, college grad, never thought Dr. Seuss books a problem. But then, she continues, quote, little did I know at the time, and honestly, even up until recently, the racist and damaging history of Dr. Seuss and his work, which included many famous children's stories, illustrations, and minstrel shows. I'm inclined to believe that the friend who gave me the book was also ignorant of the harmful and destructive stereotypes Seuss used. Over the last few weeks, however, I have found myself learning about just how problematic Dr. Seuss and his books are, especially for children who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Perhaps I am more attentive now that my son is in elementary school and I want and expect his exposure to diverse and uplifting authors and stories to continue in the classroom. Perhaps it's because our country is paying acute attention in the wake of last summer's social justice protests to issues of injustice and systemic racism, close quote. Got it? We now know decades and decades and decades of being raised on Dr. Seuss that we weren't told or informed that we were reading racist and supremacist material. They are now problematic, his books, for people of color. How? She writes, quote, regardless of why, it has been both shocking and truly disheartening to learn that Dr. Seuss held racist and xenophobic beliefs. Black and African characters in his books are often depicted as monkeys and apes. Show me. Where? How? She writes, quote, The Cat in the Hat, according to well-known research done by college professor Philip Nell, an expert in children's literature, was based on varying influences, including a Black woman who worked as an elevator operator in the building of Seuss's publisher, as well as stereotypes of Black culture, blackface performers, and minstrel shows used as entertainment for white viewers, close quote. Okay. Until this moment, I never thought of The Cat in the Hat as racial in any way. But we are told, wait, Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss, he had muses. He created literature and pictures from varying things he saw and various influences, including black people. Well, wow. Crime of crimes. He looked at black people and integrated some form of the culture he deduced from those muses into his art. Not a whiff of it, however, pejorative. What a crime. Now, I have to tell you, I kind of thought I knew something of the Cat in the Hat and never heard the story of it being, in part, based on a black woman who worked as an elevator operator. I looked it up. I looked up what this Professor Philip Nell found. Let me quote from his paper. In 1955, Dr. Seuss and William Spalding, director of Houghton Mifflin's Education Division, stepped into the publisher's elevator at 2 Park Street in Boston. As Seuss's biographer tells us, the elevator operator was an elegant, petite woman who wore white gloves and a secret smile. They don't mention that she was named Annie Williams, nor do they say she was an African American, close quote. Full stop. Horror of horrors. Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss, was on an elevator, and the operator of the elevator was elegant, smiled, wore gloves, and happened to be black. What a horrible thing. And, oh, does anyone see any negative black imagery or stereotypes in the image of the Cat in the Hat? I don't. Here's what I do know. Few people have done as much for education and literacy in America as Theodore Geisel, and few childhoods have been better affected by fewer authors than Dr. Seuss until today. A beloved author and cartoonist adored by children and adults alike, until woke warriors found that tragedy of tragedies, he got the smile from the cat looking at an elegant black woman in an elevator. Let me read you this from a great profile in The New Yorker a decade ago. You know, The New Yorker. Pretty well-credentialed, highbrow magazine, also liberal. Geisel's breakthrough came in 1937 when an old Dartmouth friend, an editor at Vanguard Press, persuaded his boss to publish And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, a book that 27 other publishing houses had turned down. This was followed by a steady stream of Dr. Seuss books, including the great political trilogy, The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins, The King's Stilts, Bartholomew and the Oobleck, and 2 classic studies of identity, Horton Hatches the Egg and Horton Hears a Who. And so in 1954, when John Hersey published a piece in Life magazine deploring the books used in public schools to teach children how to read, he called them, quote, pallid primers with abnormally courteous, unnatural, clean boys and girls, close quote. He mentioned Dr. Seuss, however, as one of the imaginative geniuses whom publishers might turn to in the hope of enriching the books they produced for schools. In 1955, one of those publishers took John Hersey's advice. This was William Spalding, Director of Education at Houghton Mifflin. Spalding had read Hersey's article. He had also read a bestseller called Why Johnny Can't Read, which had come out that year. Why Johnny Can't Read was similarly an attack on primers, which it described as horrible, stupid, emasculated, pointless, tasteless little readers, the stuff and guff about Dick and Jane or Alice and Jerry visiting the farm and having birthday parties and seeing animals in the zoo and going through dozens and dozens of totally unexciting middle-class, middle-income, middle-IQ children's activities that offer opportunities for reading Look, Look, or Yes, Yes, or Come, Come, or See the Funny, Funny Animal. The author was Rudolf Franz Flesch, Ph.D. from Teachers College at Columbia University. His point wasn't just that Dick and Jane and Alice and Jerry readers were boring. His point was that they were based on flawed teaching, flawed pedagogy. And it was the theory of word recognition, the idea that children learn words by memorizing them. Flesch argued that this was an absurd way to teach reading, since it left the child without resources when confronted with an unfamiliar word. The correct method, Flesch believed, was phonics, teaching children the sounds that letters and groups of letters make. He maintained that there are 44 such sounds in English so that they will be able to figure out unfamiliar words when they come across them. Ultimately, of course, we do memorize words. We don't stop to sound them out, but Flesch thought that people could get to that stage a lot faster if they started with phonics. Phonics. Anyone remember phonics? The story goes on. Flesch claimed that American children advanced much more slowly in reading than European children did, and he suggested that the failure of the schools was a threat to democracy and the American dream, since it deprived poor and middle-class children of the quality of education available to the affluent who were studying phonics. Flesch also asserted that first and second graders in our public schools are not taught to read at all, as shown by the fact that there isn't a single book on the market that they can manage to read by themselves. And this hint of an unexploited class of consumers is undoubtedly what inspired Spalding to invite Theodore Geisel to dinner. Write me a story that first graders can't put down, he told him. There was an added requirement. In the back of Why Johnny Can't Read, Flesch had printed 72 word lists, which parents who bought the book could use to teach their children at home. Spalding asked Geisel to write a story that used only a limited number of similar words recognizable by a first grader. Geisel later explained, he sent me a list of about 300 words and told me to make a book out of them. At first, I thought it was impossible and ridiculous, and I was about to get out of the whole thing. Then decided to look at the list one more time and to use the first two words that rhymed as the title of the book. Cat and hat were the ones my eyes lit on. I worked on the book for 9 months, throwing it across the room and letting it hang for a while, but I finally got it done. That book, written in an anapestic diameter, was Cat in the Hat. It was a tour de force, and it killed Dick and Jane. The success of Cat in the Hat persuaded Bennett Cerf to start a division at Random House called Beginner Books, and he put his wife Phyllis in charge of it. They shamelessly appropriated poor forgotten William Spalding's model. Phyllis Cerf made a list of 379 words taken from primers. Authors could choose 200 words from the list and could add 20 emergency words of their own. Beginner Books started with 4 titles in 1958. By 1960, it was bringing in $1 million a year. Random House became the largest publisher of children's books in America. 100 beginners' books were eventually published. One, Green Eggs and Ham, in 1960. Bennett Cerf had bet Theodore Geisel $50 he could not write a book using just 50 words. Geisel won the bet. In time, children's books would have tags on their front cover. You may even remember them. Cat's image, with the cat in the hat's image, saying this is an I Can Read book, because these books helped children with phonics and taught them how to read. I know it did for me. Too bad we're going to be more dumb now because of the woke. This is how you lose a culture. This is how you become less literate. It's how you lose a country, because someone saw someone in an elevator some 66 years ago and thought it a bad thing. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.